How long does Russia have to shovel in its young people into bloody trenches to capture a few inches of land around Bakhmut, throwing thousands of people away to do it, until enough coffins go home and enough slaps in the faces have been done to the Russian public for them to say, I think that's enough. So I like to talk about Russian state media on this channel all the time. I care about making sure that we monitor not only Russia's international image, what they specifically kind of, designed for foreigners to see, to try to discourage foreigners from helping Ukraine, paint this picture that foreigners would love to see about, the idea of Russia in their head. But that message is very different than what they tell their domestic audience. And makes sense from a propaganda point of view, that if you want to communicate with an audience, and this is just public speaking generally, you want to communicate to an audience the message that would most connect with them. And the message that connects with Russia's domestic audience, or at least they think will connect with the domestic audience, is not the same that would connect with the international audience. The idea of Novorossiya, Greater Russia in Ukraine, is not something that an American is going to really care about, so it's not something you talk to them about, but it is something maybe you talk about on Russian military telegrams. Igor Girkin can go off about it, or maybe even on Russian state TV. And that's a divide that I think is important to notice, and it's important for us to go into Russian speaking spaces and look at what they're saying. And I wanted to see two different ways that the new year was brought in. The type of holly jolly way, and then maybe the more honest way it was brought in by two different Russian state media clips. So first I wanted to show you this Russian state media event where, this Russian state event. I forget the exact organizations that were involved, but know that the Russian state's heavily involved. They had a New Year's special on state TV, and in this state special, this New Year special produced by state TV, they dance and they sing and they're so excited at the end of the year as they claim, Russia is enlarging whether the West likes it or not. And I wanted to play you guys this because it's quite astoundingly like looking into another world, and I'll explain what I mean in a second. My New Year's toast will be a bit unusual. During the past year, the West tried to destroy Russia. They didn't realize that in the composition of the world, Russia is the load-bearing structure. Yes, gentlemen. Like it or not, Russia is enlarging. And that's what it is. That is the event. You know what this felt like? I don't know if you guys ever seen Titanic, but as like the ship is going down and the crew on the ship is panicking and they're doing everything they can to salvage the situation, or they get people on boats, whatever. This feels like the musicians on the boat as the ship was sinking. But this is even more kind of ridiculous than that situation, because those musicians didn't attempt to make everyone pretend that the boat isn't sinking. See, Russia crashed into an iceberg, which was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And as the boat is starting to capsize and water seeping in, this is what they're doing to try to distract the Russian general population from this. They seem very jovial, even though, all this idea of, Russia's getting bigger. They annexed Lyman, that was recaptured by the Ukrainians. They annexed Kherson and they was recaptured by the Ukrainians. The only provincial capital the Russians captured, recaptured by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have recaptured around, actually no, more than 50% than the territory that Russia's captured since the start of this new part of the war, February 24th forward. Right? More than 50% they've recaptured it. And this has come at big cost not only to Ukraine, but also to Russia, economically, geopolitically, diplomatically, and when it comes to just blood for amount of square footage gained. And the fact that a lot of that square footage is going to be very difficult to hold on to, and their grasp is slipping month by month. Maybe they can salvage it. I tend to lean towards the not salvaging crowd. And it feels as if this is a reenactment of that scene from the Titanic. But as the ship is sinking, these wonderful people who are playing the music to kind of like see the world out, as was the case in the Titanic, instead in this case they're telling everybody the ship isn't sinking, don't pay attention. In fact, we're actually adding a whole new portion to the ship. It's going to be 10 times better as the ship is actively you know? That's what it feels like. It feels like peering into another world where Russia has to, at all costs, feed these delusions of not only grandeur that comes with these like just general imperial ambitions, but also the delusions of not seeing what's clearly in front of your face. Definitely for people who are closer to the war in Belgorod, who have had their communities struck with, bombing attacks from the Ukrainians. I mean, a lot of this is right in their face, right? Like, for example, the Russians claim in the first 48 hours of the war, they disabled the Ukrainian Air Force. Ukrainian Air Force is still operating. In fact, a few times they even did operations in Russian territory, what is actually internationally recognized Russian territory. That's just quite blatantly in their face, showing that the Russian government lied. Moskva. It is widely accepted in Russian society that the Russian government lied about the Moskva. And on state media, they even treated it like, hey, they're lying to us. Let's talk about who really, sunk the Moskva. It feels like a nation that, they almost, know they're being conned, but they just haven't been, slapped out of it. It's very strange. Because people know that the government lies to them, and they know they lied about them about the war, and they know that there's problems, but what's going to be the thing that slaps them out of it? What's going to be the straw on the camel's back? Some people thought it might be the loss of Kherson, since, they announced they would never leave, they annexed this territory, and they lost the only provincial capital. That wasn't the case. Will it be the next city? Will it be the next, big victory in Crimea or wherever? What will be the breaking point? How long does Russia have to shovel in its young people into bloody trenches to capture a few inches of land around Bakhmut, throwing thousands of people away to do it, until enough coffins go home and enough slaps in the faces have been done to the Russian public for them to say, I think that's enough. I think we're going to pull it in. So it's so crazy seeing this performance, because it really just feels like the ship is sinking, bring out the ballet dancers. But that isn't the only way the new year was called into by, announced to the world by Russian state media talking heads. Solovyev actually, talked about the new year and a lot during his end of year kind of shows that he does, during the last month of December. But for his final show of 2022, it almost felt like a doomsday prophecy. It almost felt like I was listening to the Branch Davidians, not Russian state media, as he talks about how, we all die, it is what it is. Listen to what he has to say. Right? Again, February 24th, the whole Air Force is crumbling, the whole all of, Ukraine's gonna collapse in a week, and, these Westoids are screwed, to, if we all die, we all die. Kind of a massive change, a far cry from the happy laughter of, that we saw on, the other thread. The other video. Let's play. I actually think that I'm going to say something now for which many will criticize me. But actually, life is really overrated. In the world there is, It didn't make it into the segment when I was talking to the hero of Russia, General Apty. But I asked him, Apty, 1 second, Apty, do you feel death? He said, I'm a religious man. I can't fear death. It's a natural part of life. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of letting people down. I'm afraid of not justifying people's trust in me. But fearing death, what's the point? Why fear the inevitable? No, they don't fear it. That's why they're there. We'll go to heaven. That's why death is the end of one path on earth and the start of another. But to fear it and to let that influence your decisions? Look, if he was talking about in my personal life, I try not to fear death. You know, I live as an adventurer, you know. I'm going to go to Thailand and, like, I don't know, get ice cream. That's one thing, right? But when he's talking about this in a political context, in a war, this starts to feel like doomsday prophecy. He's not saying, oh, the end times are coming, but this idea of, like, you must sacrifice your life for the greater cause. Life, is it really that valuable? This is the type of stuff I imagine was said by the Tsardom, whether it was their military staff or whoever, between the years 1914 to 1917, to justify the rats in the trenches and the horrific conditions that the soldiers faced and the horrific death totals that the Russian military faced. Like, oh, you know, we've got a high population, we'll just get in more. Death, you know, it's all the rage these days. You know, death is the new black, as they say. It really makes it come off like a doomsday cult. But this is not really new for Solovyev. This type of doomsday cultism. This is actually like the 3rd or 4th time I've seen him say something along this line. So this isn't like, oh, a one out of the blue moon, he said this crazy thing and never said it again. I've seen this narrative repeated multiple times on Russian state media. And that's the reason I'm bringing it up. Because if it was just once, it's like, okay, that's weird, but whatever. But it almost feels like they're like just saying, hey, everybody, life isn't that good. Have you tried dying for your country? Much better. Death? Yeah. What, you know, life, is it really worth it? Life kind of sucks. Hey, do you have depression? I got a career choice for you. That's what it comes off of. Just like how the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, which is totally not just controlled by the Russian government, ended up saying on camera that if you are a Russian soldier and you go and you die in Ukraine, you like go to heaven. This kind of like devaluation of life is the type of stuff that is done before you shovel tens of thousands of people to die pointlessly. It's never a good sign.